Todd, great to have you on the show, man.
Hey, Nate. Thanks for having me.
You bet. I absolutely love your story, and I know our listener or viewer will also find it very helpful in the journey of life. We know that change is inevitable. Transformation, we hope, is a part of that. We know that it's not always clean and pretty. Life is full of all kinds of messiness. It may look like it's all put together on the outside, but you know just as well as I do, and the listener knows that there's no one life that has no bumps, no challenges, and I don't even know if we would want that. In
hmm
fact, I'm gonna pose this to you. I was just talking with a friend just the other day, just a deep conversation about conflict and trials. And he said, Nate, imagine a world where there is no challenge, no conflict, no trial. He said, imagine not having an understanding of what courage is, not having an understanding of what it feels like to overcome, not having even the mind to see what was and appreciate what is. He said, man, that would be a world I wouldn't want to live in. And I'm like, wow,
hmm
bro, that's like, I mean, that's a bombshell to like just really consider that because we want things to be smooth, we want things to be easy. But however, and don't get me wrong, there's tragedy that really hurts, and there's
hmm
things that are really devastating in life, and we need to empathize and we need to walk through that very sensitively. However, at the same time, I don't know that I'd be who I am had I not gone through the trials that I've been through. And I wonder what your position is on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love leading with that. You're talking about resilience. And without resilience, well, really, you're talking about lessons and failure, right? So without failure, there are no lessons. Without lessons, there's no growth. And without growth, honestly, are you living? That's my take on it. Life is all about evolution. That's why I named my marketing company Evolve Marketing. It really is. It's all about change, and that's what I'm all about. It's what my podcast is all about. It's building that growth mindset and committing to this continuous evolution of change.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would not want to live what I would call a perfect life. I'm actually going to be having a show devoted to this because I think it's a great topic. You look at like some of those one-hit wonders or those young kids who were stars, from the beginning, and they never had to experience any failure. So they never built that grit, that resilience. Where are they now? That- Yeah. So I think if you look at some of the most successful people, which I know you've done your research on that for sure. Um, those people have been through some trials and tribulations. That's
Yeah.
what that's what really made them who they are and why they're where they're at today. So,
Yeah, it's the strengthening of your struggle muscles. I've heard it called that before. And
mm,
it's this, okay, how strong have I become through struggle? And it's really, and I think it's a lot of perspective because we can face a trial and say, "Oh my goodness, this is hard. It hurts. It's painful. I don't know. I don't know that I want this." However, at the same time, what happens when, let's talk about it just for the analogy of exercise, physical conditioning, right? When we go to exercise, if you've been to the gym, I've been to
mm,
the gym,
mm,
it hurts. I mean, it's hard lifting that weight, and really your best moment of growth is when you have the highest amount of tension and struggle, right? That's that
mm,
last set. It's that last
right.
push that causes the muscles to grow.
Mm,
And at the same time, we look at that like that's a huge win, right? They say, well, yeah, I benched, X pounds, I got all the way. I went to failure. It's interesting. that your
Mhm.
your muscles grow the most when you get to the position
Mhm.
of total failure. But we don't look at life's trials necessarily in that way. You know, we don't look at trials as like, oh my goodness, I am going to the to the Gold's Gym, if you will, of life daily by strengthening and when you look at even scripture, being a person of faith, when there's a scripture in the book of James that says it says consider it pure joy when you face all kinds of trials. I'm like, wait a minute. Not only it's like a double down. It's not only okay, endure it. It's a flipping of the script. It's like, not don't just endure it. Consider it joy.
Yeah.
Because and here's what he says, because it's the testing of your faith that produces perseverance. And this is what you're talking about, right? This is like resilience and perseverance go hand in hand. And perseverance, he said, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete.
Mm.
Bro.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty powerful. And, no pain, no gain, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the sign that's at Gold's Gym. And I've been working out for years, so I totally understand that analogy and appreciate it. Yeah, you have to go through something. That's the way that we grow. That's the way that we learn.
And you've gone through some things, and I appreciate your willingness to share some of your story as it pertains to this topic, and it speaks to those who are listening, who perhaps maybe in this season right now that you are in, perhaps are on the front end, perhaps haven't experienced it, perhaps on the back end, like you. In relationship to this specifically, what are some examples in your own life that you faced through this process of strengthening?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a short guy, so I feel like I've been like scratching and clawing the whole time since I've been, a kid. I was very athletic, played a lot of sports. I was always the guy that had to compete with speed and then strength as I got older and started hitting the gym. It's always been for me that Rocky mentality, honestly. So I've always been the underdog and I love the fight. I love the battle. I come from a very blue collar family. So my dad was a janitor, my mom was a waitress. They worked two jobs their whole life to give my sister and I some decent things and a good education. So that was always inbred in me to have that hardworking attitude and spirits. Um, and then
Was that
I
your
get
was that your was that your did your parents embodied that? Did when you were young, did you embrace it? Did you lament it? What was sort of the atmosphere around how you accepted that hardworking attitude?
That's a good question. I actually embraced it. I So there were things, and we were a low middle class. So we had some things decent, very mixed neighborhood, but not a lot of great things. If I wanted those, I had to work for it. So I had a very entrepreneurial spirit early on. BMXing was big back then. I wanted this particular Diamondback bike, and
Oh
I
yeah, I remember the Diamondbacks. I
yeah, that was,
remember the Diamondbacks.
and this, I think it was the Silver Streak or something. And I had the jersey, and it was a whole thing, but I
Oh,
wanted it. And I knew the only way that I was going to get that was to work to earn my own money. I had a paper route, which a lot of people don't realize, and I don't think they even do it anymore, but that was I was creating a business. I learned so much about business back then that I had no idea that I was learning, and that was such a great experience. But so through,
how old were you when you had the paper route?
oh my gosh, probably 10,
Yeah.
10, 11 years old.
And were you on your bike, riding your bike to the papers, or
No, no, my dad would actually drive us
you would
down.
drive?
Yeah, we started off close to home and wasn't great neighborhood. And then we ended up with a really great route in the end, which was, about 5, 10 minutes away. My dad would drive us, and then, we had a whole system.
Now,
But
paper routes. A lot of people don't know this. You couldn't be late in the day, right? I mean, papers.
mm,
The whole idea with the newspapers is it was early morning when people would read their news, right?
yeah, so it was all about the weekends. That's when they had to be there early, 6, 7 o'clock, which wasn't a whole lot of fun as a kid who wants to get up early. Although I was that kid that was up early. I didn't want to miss cartoons because you had to, I think, 8 o'clock it came on, and if you weren't there, it's not like these days where you could DVR it or Cartoon Network all day long. It was, on channel 8 at 8 o'clock for an hour. You're either there or you missed it.
So, what time would you
So,
get up for the paper route delivery?
oh gosh, I want to say probably 6 o'clock. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
My dad was a saint though. He would have them all prepped and folded. He was that guy. He loved doing that. It was very monotonous work. And then they would be ready to go. So we were just the executors.
oh yeah, but even that, just getting up on
Hmm.
your Saturday, right? Saturday is like the kids' day. Dude,
Hmm.
hey, I get to sleep in and
Right.
cereal, watch my cartoons. But you didn't. You did what
Yeah. Yeah. Do what I had to do. I enjoyed it, honestly. The hard part was collecting the money. Back then, you went door to door collecting that money, even if it was a person, or a lot of people were just Sunday only. Hey, not, do you have 75 cents to pay for this paper that you owe? I can see it hanging in your couch there. There's probably 50, 75 cents. So, but that whole practice, that was rough too, especially in the rougher neighborhoods. You go back and back and back, but that was really building for me that client relationship practice, which I didn't realize that back then, but it was great. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was like owning a business. It really was.
Yeah,
So,
man. I
yeah.
identify with that. Yeah, I had a little golf ball business. So we lived
Oh,
across the street about the same age, and there was a golf course across the road,
mhm.
and we lived on a little bit of acres. My mom wanted to get into farming. So we moved out of the city,
Oh,
and I
nice.
was in Chicago. We moved out of the city and moved to a little town called Yorkville, which at the time, Yorkville, Illinois was very small and it was very rural. Not anymore. Of course, many things that were once rural are now sprawling communities. So
Right.
this huge lawn, and we didn't have a power mower. We had the roll kind. It was manual, so it had this
Oh,
drum, and you push the drum, and it would cut the grass with
oh,
a
I remember that.
drum.
That's old. That's like
Old
real
school,
old school
old
right
school,
there.
right? And so I was getting my workout in at the same time as these golf balls were getting stuck in the blade. So I was like, okay, well, I
Hmm.
take them out, and I gotta back then cigar boxes were a thing. I don't know why everybody had cigar boxes, but anyway, you toss in a
Hmm.
cigar box, took them across the street, cleaned them off, and I was in business. I had my golf balls, and I was selling to the golfers. And like you said, there's something to that process that opens up the critical thinking and the analysis part of the brain to begin to take ownership of, wow, how
Hmm.
can I be participating even at a small level in this amazing experiment called capitalism, right? And I think for our kids, if someone listening is like, it's tougher today than it was certainly 20, 30, 40, if not more years ago, but it's not impossible to expose our kids to the resilience building and the
Hmm.
entrepreneurial challenge at a young age. Some kids, of course, there's lemonade stands and whatnot, but there's always different things. A lot of kids want to be influencers today. They want to be social media stars and things like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, engaging them engaging
Hmm.
them to begin to think about that. My son wanted to start a business, a video game business. There's a video game called Roblox, and if
Hmm. Oh,
anyone's
yeah.
got kids, they've probably heard of that.
Yeah.
And so we went through these iterations of him building out a game,
Hmm.
and it was an epic fail for him in terms of like monetizing it, which is
Right.
totally fine because that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't to make $1 million. I mean, you could have maybe possibly, but the
Right.
goal was teach teach these principles uh,
Hmm.
of resilience, of learning, of business, and they I think they last a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And just taking a risk.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid to take a risk.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah, I've heard it said like this: if you've gone through your whole life not feeling, you're not trying hard enough.
Hmm.
Let's
Yeah,
try a little harder because you need some risks, you need some opportunity, and I think at a young age too, to have some controlled risk in a sense. And that's not to say that things won't go wrong later. That's not to say that, hey, I've prepared my kids and I've given them a good life and given them lots of tools. That's not to say that later on there aren't struggles that they'll have to overcome in a different space of life, like
right,
you have and like I have.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
let's talk a little bit
absolutely.
about that.
Yeah, life challenges.
Yeah, brother, let's
Yeah,
get let's
yeah,
get
get deep. Yeah, I certainly had my fair share, like everybody, really. It, depends on where you grow up, who the people are
oh
around
yeah.
you, the type of area.
Well, you'd mentioned in our pre-call that you'd heard our episode with Jason Courtney, Cell Block
Mhm.
Salvation, and if you're listening, you haven't heard that, definitely go back and listen. Very powerful, moving story on Jason's journey. He was an entrepreneur. But the entrepreneurship world he was in was selling drugs, selling weed. Now I think you can actually be a legal drug dealer
Mhm.
and sell marijuana legally, but he was definitely not in that area. It was illegal at the time, and
Right.
he faced some major issues. And you and I both have been down not necessarily a road where we were in jail necessarily, but we've been on the wrong side of the tracks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would agree that that episode with Jason's great. I share a lot of the same feelings that Jason has, and even some of the paths that we went down. I got into drugs at a young age. Hung out with an older crowd.
How old were you?
What? Probably 15.
Wow. Now,
Yeah,
were they
15.
hard drugs? I mean, just marijuana and
No, we're talking marijuana.
yeah.
And then it did escalate a little bit. Nothing. I never. Well, it depends on. I guess back then marijuana, a little bit of coke here and there. But it got to a point. It was it was fine. It was fun. It was recreational. Everybody was doing it, so it wasn't really a thing. But I have a very addictive and obsessive personality, and I didn't realize it then, like a lot of younger kids. But it got to a point where it wasn't just recreational on the weekends; it was every day. And then it got to a point where it was I couldn't do anything unless I got high first. Um, and that was a problem. And I didn't realize it then, but it got to a point where I ended up living with a couple of guys in a house, and I knew one of them. I didn't know the other, and it was a drug-ridden house. It was just drugs, 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 weed, and coke, and they were selling it, and I was doing it, and contributing to this, and I got into it with one of the guys, and then I left for the evening, and I went out with some other friends. Close the bars down. My friends drop me off, and I come home and I sit down, and no longer than 5 minutes, these guys come over and just start beating me to a pulp. I don't know what they were on. They obviously had an agenda, um, and they just beat me to death, really. And it was all I could do to get out of there while one's holding me, the other one's, the one guy was a pretty big dude. Um, it was scary. And it was that moment after that that I reflected and said to myself, "Man, this is not good. This is not me. I need to make some change here. I'm better than this. I have ideas. I was always a creative person, an artist, in school, and I made a change. So that
Before
next week, I
before
enrolled in a
before you did that,
university.
hold on. Before you did
Yeah,
that, how badly were you beaten? Did you have to go to the hospital?
I did not. I actually, a lot of people ask, I was so embarrassed,
You just
honestly. I just took it on the chin,
On
literally.
the chin and just, gosh, man.
Yeah, I didn't even go to the cops either. I was just really embarrassed. But yeah, I was, bloody. I still have a chipped tooth that reminds me of it every day. Um,
And
but
how
yeah,
old were you at the time?
I was 20, 21.
So
Yeah.
were you you were out of the house?
Oh yeah, I had been out. I moved out when I was 18. Yeah,
Me
and I had
too.
been
That
in
was
a
easy.
couple different homes on my own, and so, but yeah.
Where were your parents in this? Do they know about any of this? I mean,
Yeah, my dad, I called my dad's the one that picked me up.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
What'd you say
Yeah,
to him?
I was
Remember
able to
what you said to
run.
him?
I remember running out of the house, trying to get out, and I ran to a telephone booth. If you remember, if anyone
Huh?
remembers those, and called my dad and said, you need to come get me, man. I'm just like struggling here." Now, my dad was a very quiet guy. Probably didn't want to know all the details, but all he cared about was me and supportive and get me out of that situation. That's all he cared about. Didn't ask any questions.
Bro, that's so huge. And I don't wanna like just gloss over that because um I mean you called your dad, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
You could have called anybody, but you called your dad.
yeah, I knew he would come get me. I wasn't far, 5 minutes,
Yeah.
from my parents' house where I grew up. But yeah, came to get me,
A,
and that
a,
was it.
a lot of people can't call their dad or they won't, or they're so embarrassed that they won't even, but you and your dad had enough of, a good enough relationship to
Oh yeah.
where you knew that he was a person that you could count on, not only just because
Hmm.
he was close, but it sounds like he wasn't going to judge you. He wasn't
Hmm.
going to like shame you for that. And that speaks volumes, man, because sometimes as parents, the first thing that we want to do is lecture our
Hmm.
kids. The first thing we want to do is say, "Hey, didn't I tell you not to get into this mess? Look at what happened to you. I told you so." I mean, even though
Hmm.
maybe we don't necessarily say it, sometimes we say it by our actions or just by not saying
Right.
anything at all.
Right.
And that's huge because someone listening to dad and wants to have that kind of relationship with their kid to where they're a safe person even after they're in their 20s. Like I would love for my son if he gets into trouble to be able to pick up the phone and say, "Dad, hey, I'm in a bad spot. I need you." And
Hmm.
I want to be that kind of dad.
Hmm.
And there's a place for us as parents that we could, that we can cultivate that relationship. And we won't have all the answers. You said your dad's kind of a quiet guy. Your dad doesn't have the answers. I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers, right? We don't always have the answers for our kids. Sometimes our kid just needs us to be there.
Yep.
Just pick me up, you know?
Just pick me up. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned all that because I never really thought about it that way. I don't know. It's just by default that, that's who I was going to call. But yeah, it is interesting that, yeah,
You
he
had
was
that kind
there.
of dad
So
because
yeah.
you've never had any other dad. So, my dad was
Right.
estranged. Like my parents got divorced when I was a kid, and I've shared this many times on the
Hmm.
program. So, it, when I was in trouble, like I got in trouble a lot in Chicago, and like I didn't want to call my dad. Like I didn't want. I mean, my dad lived across the street from the police station. At first, I thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen because I was always in trouble. And then I was like, it's the best thing that could happen because I never had to call him to come pick me up when I got locked up.
Just
Right?
walk over.
I just
Yeah.
walk over, I walk across the street, I'm home, 3 in the morning, doors
Hmm.
unlocked, and I'm like, I don't have to deal with that.
Right.
However, that was a disconnect. That was a disconnect between me and the person who was really teaching me to be emancipated, right? From the parenting relationship and in terms of getting freedom, at the same time, there's an ongoing relationship that is can be very trusting if you cultivate it. And I love my dad. He's passed on, and we had a great relationship after my teen years. However, there's just something to be said for that, underscoring the value of that, and giving you permission also to start to figure it out on your own because as you began to share, and I'm really looking forward to hearing it. That was a turning point for you.
Mhm.
Major turning point in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I was living in a fog, honestly. I was a janitor at a local hospital. I um, had no aspirations of doing anything else. I was pretty happy, I was going to work 8 to 5, blue collar, and I had my friends, doing drugs, getting high, and everything was good. I didn't know any better. A lot of people from the neighborhood weren't really pursuing college or anything like that. So it wasn't really out of the norm. But yeah, that incident happened, and then I enrolled in college to study arts and found my way into graphic design, which it was just a marriage meant to be. That was all me, and I love that. And I had some really great support back there because it took me 6 years. I paid for it myself. I worked full time in the evenings and then went to school during the day. And it was a long journey, but I was ready. I, graduated with honors and, paid off those loans 15 years later. But that was the start of my journey of transformation and change.
It's so beautiful to hear that. You talk about like, okay, hey, I'm, you know, whatever, pothead. I'm in a fog, and I have no real sense of purpose and direction in my life except for, hey, I'm just living for the day. And you have this major, shakeup, right? You get beat down, and it's like, hold on a second, where is this going, right? Where is my life going? And that is the catalyst for you to make some major impactful positional changes in life. And I mean, the fact that you graduated with honors, same thing for me. Like I when I was 21, I dropped out of college. And in fact, when I was in high school, I mean, I don't even know what my grade point average was. I didn't even care. I don't know about you, but I mean, I'm
Same here.
pretty sure you're probably in the same boat
Yeah.
as I was
Yep.
in, right? Could care less. And
Hmm.
you'd see your counselor, and of course, back in high school, back in those days, you take a test and say, "Oh, what would you be?" It's like it was almost a joke. Oh yeah, I could be like, I don't know. Mine was, I don't know if you remember, you took that test. Mine was judge. I'm like, yeah, right. I got to go to school for another 4 years, then I got to go to law school, and then I got to do all this other stuff, and I'm a criminal anyway, right?
Right.
So like, like who am I going to judge? So it's there's such a disconnect. And then I think also speaks to young people today. We need more mentorship. We need more people
Hmm.
in our young
Absolutely.
lives who can speak life, because there's so much of a disconnect in what people think is possible and what people think is probable.
Mm.
And if it's not probable, it's not possible in your own mind. And so
Right.
we need people in the world to infuse probability. And probability comes from, hey, here's where you are, here's where you're going, here's where it leads. Let's talk about where it can be. Because for you and
Mm.
for me, we had to learn the hard way.
Right.
We had to learn the hard way. I was standing in front of a judge, possible 5-year prison sentence. And I mean, I was nervous. I was like, oh my goodness,
Mm.
what am I doing with my life? This is ridiculous. I'm smarter than this. I'm
Right.
better than this. But I had no direction. I had
Right.
nothing but the hood, right?
Mhm.
We didn't grow up in a middle class area. We, low to middle, I guess you'd say. And if you weren't doing things that were, street type stuff, you weren't getting by, right? You were, and so that culture, your environment, the environment culture we're in,
Mhm.
has such an impact. You talked about being in that house. Man, I was in so many of those houses. Ironically, when I was in my all the way till 21, I had never had a sip of alcohol, and I never did drugs. I never all my buddies, we played spades a lot back in the day, like this card,
Mm. Mhm.
and
Yeah.
everybody'd be smoking pot and drinking 40 ounces of, Colt, Colt
Right.
malt liquor or whatever else. And I'd be the only one because I just didn't. Now that's not to say I didn't do it later, but 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 that doesn't mean that. But the environment, so you can not do drugs and alcohol and still get yourself in trouble. Like you
Mm.
can still, and in my buddies' houses, Like there were days, and I missed it one time, kind of like you. I missed one time where a bunch of dudes came in there and just pistol whipped everybody. There was blood on the walls, and it was, I
Mm,
mean, that's the environment. Then, like you, I
mm.
mean, you experienced this firsthand. I could have been the guy who got beat down if I would just been there that night, but I wasn't.
Right,
Somewhere else. And
right.
so, and that's another reason not to glamorize that lifestyle. That's another reason why we need to really speak life into that and say, you know what? It's not fun. It's not cool. It is a hole. It's
Right.
a dark road that leads to nowhere. And you were ready to make that change and get off that road.
Yeah. And actually, I don't know if you remember your episode with Jason, what he said. It really touched me. He summed it up. You asked him what it's like to be incarcerated. And he said it's the loneliest place to be with the most people or something like that.
That's right.
Um, so yeah, you have to make a choice. Everybody is capable of change. It's built into us. It's in our DNA, but you have to make a choice. And once you put on your big boy pants, somebody's, going to push you, but you need to make it. It's on you. And there are those that make the choice and commit to change, and those that don't.
Yeah. And we
You
know
can,
them. And you probably still have friends or,
yeah,
back in the day who didn't make that change. I do too.
yeah.
I was talking to my son about this just a couple days ago, and about resilience, about change, about drive, about determination, and I've come to equate it to two different kinds of pain. So you have on the one hand, when you have a major life impact like you did, you're on your face and you're down, right? And you have a pain of getting back up. There's a pain that in getting up. On the other side, there's a pain in
Mm,
giving up on life, giving up on the possibilities, giving up on progress and the change that leads you to a better future state. And when the pain of giving up outweighs the pain of getting up, you will get back up. It's a choice, like you said. And each of us, there's a lot of things in life that are beyond our control. But one thing that is not beyond our control is the fact that we can choose what decisions we make.
hmm.
We can choose. When you're a kid, choices are made for you. When you're an adult, you make your
Right.
own. No
Yep.
excuse. No excuse.
Abs-
I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
sorry. I know we have all kinds of life situations, but there's no excuse because the choice we make will lead us in or out of that environment. You say, Nate, you don't know my situation. You don't know, Todd, you don't know where I've been. You
Mhm.
don't know.
Right.
But we know this. We've made choices in on at the I mean, bro, you were beat down and you made the choice.
Yeah.
You make a change.
Yeah. Made a choice. Yeah.
And so let's walk that out. So when you decided to enroll, how did you go from not having much, from the high school experience of the GPA and to having to graduating with honors, man?
Yeah. That is interesting. I just made a shift.
Yeah.
It was a mindset change. I was ready. I was done. I was ready to do something. And I'm
Mm,
a very determined person. I'm 110 in, but I'm
mm,
not going to do 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And that's part of that obsessive, addictive personality. So I went from being addicted to destroying my mind to being addicted to growth and learning. And that's all I wanted. I just fed off of it and I would have nothing less. So I learned, studied, read, did whatever I could. I wanted to get straight A's and I wanted to do great work, and
mm.
make great relationships with professors and teachers. And that's what I did. So, I'm not sure
Yeah.
why. It was just, I was ready.
Yeah. You and I have such a similar experience because when I was in my late 20s, same thing. My head was finally clear. I was not clouded any longer. I went back to school and same thing, honors straight A's. And it's that same addictiveness that, we're so driven. It just has to be, the cause has to be worthy, and we'll lock on.
Hmm.
And I think that speaks to so many people today when, someone listening is like, oh, I've either yourself or someone you love is on this trajectory. It's like, okay, well, how do I give something that is so attractive, so worthwhile, so achievable that we just lock onto that. At the same time, it's life-giving rather than life-taking. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to think back too. You got me curious. There was a little anxiety about it. I was scared, and it had been so long since I had embraced education and learning that, and I was a really smart kid when I was very young before I started destroying my mind, that I had forgot about that. So I wasn't sure if I was actually really capable of this. Um, but I had moments and I had a few teachers that expressed interest in me and saw something. If anything else, the grit and determination. And that's all I needed. I just needed a couple of people to say, man, you know what? I'm going to let you into this class. You're not supposed to be in here, but I know you're working full time and you're trying to make things work. And I see your attitude. I see your determination. I'm going to let you do this. And it was just a couple of moments like that. And I'm still close friends with those people. But that's what I needed. I just needed a little bit of hope and to celebrate a few wins and to get that courage. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Now let's just execute. Let's just do it.
that's actually amazing because that it's almost full circle. You talked about hope, and it's even in another passage talks about this idea of suffering or challenge building your perseverance. Back to the perseverance, but
Hmm.
perseverance, it takes it a couple steps further. Perseverance then builds character, and then character hope.
Mm.
And so, like this formula for, okay, I got to struggle, find some struggle muscles, build those. It's going to teach me to build perseverance. That perseverance is going to turn into some character building. Boy, don't we need that in our society. Character
Hmm.
building. And then hope is like they say hope's not a strategy. What it is, it's like it's an ember, it's a flame. And
Mm.
once it begins to ignite, it motivates us because we believe now there's possibilities that are also probable. In your case, you began to embrace the educational world, and I believe that the true pathway to progress as human beings is always going to be through the pathway of number one, curiosity,
Mm.
and then two, and then the creativity in learning. Not always
Mm.
be a lifelong learner, whether it's
Mm.
whether it's in academia, whether it's just in life, right? Be a
Yep.
lifelong learner. And what it also means to be a lifelong learner, it doesn't mean just consumption of information because I think we live in a state and age now, Todd, where people are just consuming,
Mm.
copious amounts, whether it's YouTube shorts or videos or podcasts, just like this. There's got to be a time where you apply, not just
Hmm.
consume as you experience in education. Like, okay, I'm going to learn this, and then I'm going to go experience it and develop it.
Right.
So we need to have margin in our day to take what we're learning and then turn around and apply it and use it, teach it to someone else, and not just be consumption. It's just like when you're eating, right? You can't just eat. You need to actually then expend the energy,
Hmm.
and turn around and apply it. And I think that's important in our journey. And so, what are some of the ways that you've utilized or experienced some of the learning that you've had through these experiences?
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, I want to go back just a little bit to COVID.
Hmm.
So I think COVID was that period of time where it was, really horrible for a lot of people, but there was a lot of opportunity there. Um, it was another big milestone for me in my transformation. I ended up connecting with my now high performance coach slash life coach. Um, and I hired her and she started coaching me. But She had me go through this program called Positive Intelligence. Are you familiar with
Mm,
that? Oh man,
let's check
you'd
it out.
love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so Shirzad Shamin. He's the author. He created this program. It's a New York Times bestselling book. There's a program that only coaches can take you through, and then there's an app. So it's all about, because you kept saying talking about building that muscle. Well, this is all about building the mental muscle, and it's all geared towards shifting from a negative to a positive, obviously positive intelligence. But what it did for me, I struggled all my life with I was a hothead. I had a bad temper, and it really crushed me in sports and then into my professional career. It followed me for most of my life. I'm 53 now, and it followed me up through at different points. And this program allowed me to build a pause button. So whereas I used to go 1 to 10, lickety split, no pause, right? No reflection. Now I just take it all in. I take a step back. I come into every conversation, every scenario with what I call an empty cup, right? That's the best cup you can bring. It's empty, it's open to what is happening. So I'm not having any predetermined notions. I'm not being judgmental. I'm not making any assumptions. I'm just coming in and saying, here's the situation. And what this program teaches you, that you're going to love this, Nate. It's all about finding the gift and the opportunity in every single situation. And when you start to do that, man, life looks a hell of a lot different.
Mm.
It really does. And that program literally changed my life. I am a whole different person. I'm going to end up being a coach of that program, um, living a positive life, looking at life from a different lens, and finding no matter how tough it is, how hard it is, there is a gift there. There is a gift. You just need to dig. You need to find it.
Huge, man. I absolutely love that. We'll make sure to have that read those resources in the show notes as well, and I'll make sure to key in on it. There's the gift and the opportunity in every single situation. What a reframing. Someone listening right now is like, whoa, I mean, that blows you away because every day we likely will have situations that we don't
Mhm.
consider a gift or an opportunity. And we have them every day. And I've had I just had a conversation with somebody this morning, and it was I was misunderstood in terms of the message I was sending. And at first I was like, I used to be a hothead too, just like
Oh man.
right? I mean, it was like escalation right away. And it's ironic that either people listening or people who know us would be find that to be completely foreign today. But because of the pause that you mentioned, the pause is so important. And sometimes the
Mhm.
pause is for a moment, sometimes it's for a day,
Mhm.
sometimes it's for a week. It's amazing when if you're in a mood or a moment and you feel the anger, the aggression, or the anxiety, say, let me just pause. Let me just put a hold on this emotion until it's subsided. Again, the next day, sometimes just waiting to send a
Mhm.
message, an email,
Yeah. Yeah,
a
we
text.
coined this. You'll hear this in a couple of my episodes, called the draft box strategy.
Mhm.
You just get it down, you put in draft mode, and you come back to it.
Yeah,
9 out of 10 times, that message that you were going to send the day before is going to be totally different. It's going
totally
to have a
different, or won't even send it at all. It's
whole different tone. Yeah, you may not even send it. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah,
that's a great strategy. And Abraham Lincoln, back in the day, similar strategy. Many letters
mhm.
didn't actually go out. And
Right.
what a great strategy. Yeah, and it works. It helps to
Oh,
put you in the right frame.
hmm,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Make
Yeah.
wiser choices. Well, this has been amazing. I can't believe our we've already run through so much time. We'll have to chat again because there's a lot of wisdom in your message in your own coaching that I'd love to continue to share. However, before we go, there's a question I like to ask some of our
Mhm.
our our our, uh, our guests, and when time is permitted, and I'd love to ask you this. One day there will be a time, hopefully at the end of your journey, your great
Hmm.
summit, when you're at the very end of the journey, and you'll be able to look and see everything and everyone you've ever been able to impact.
Hmm.
If there's one thing that you would like others to have said about Todd at that end of the junction, this side of eternity, what would that be?
Oh, that's pretty simple. He cared more for others, than he cared for himself. Like not that I didn't take care of myself, because I definitely am all about self-love, self-care, grace, and growth. But it's about being a servant leader. That's my mission is to help people. That's about being honestly, being a leader is serving. So you should be a servant leader, and how I think about it. But yeah, he was a servant leader. He
Hmm,
cared about others, and he was just trying to help people, and whatever that may be. So yeah, that's an easy one. The end of life game is, I think, if we play that game every day, and I was just listening to a podcast about that this week, it's it reframes everything, right?
absolutely, man. If you
It's
begin with the
morbid,
end in
but
mind. It's and
yeah.
it's freeing.
Mhm.
It's a release, and it's also directional, and it's easier to make decisions when we have that focus in mind. You,
Right.
of course, we love servant leadership, and Todd, you are on your way, and we're so appreciative of our time together and your journey and you sharing with our listener.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You and I are we have a lot in common, so we'll definitely have to circle back. Maybe you're on my show and
Love
we
it.
get to, but I'm really curious and hopeful to see where our journey goes together.
Agreed.